Hi, welcome back to Life Through Her Eyes. I'm Debbie.
I'm Jackie.
Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing why media has racial bias and what we can do about it. So
Yes.
recently, Ow, ow. So recently, both my bestie Jackie and I had watched a documentary on Netflix about this girl named Gabby Petito. And it was a documentary about her also being a vlogger. Well, I guess we are trying to do podcasts, but it's kind of in a similar lane, so to speak. And so we just kind of wanted to talk about her. And so when we were watching this documentary, we noticed that so much media coverage was around her very shortly after she disappeared. I believe
Lots.
she was like found within a month. Was that correct, Jackie? Her
I
body?
believe so. Yeah.
So she had some amazing humans
Hmm.
that got behind her case whenever it got on the news. And there was one particular group of van vloggers as well that were traveling, and they had noticed her van. And when it popped up on the news and social media, they were like, oh, let's see if that's in our little video log. And sure enough, they saw it and they were able to
Hmm.
pinpoint a location. And then another person was like, oh, hey, we saw him assaulting her in this general location. And it all got drawn to the conclusion of where she was at during a certain time period, which allowed the police the opportunity to quickly find at least her remains, because
Yep.
sadly they were not able to get her in time.
Yep.
But the crazy thing is, they were able to catch her after that first incident where they had reported, or someone, some good citizen had reported
Hmm.
that they saw a man attacking a woman and jump into a van that was the same description. So whenever the police came up to her and him and they questioned them, they were able to separate them. And even though clearly she looked like the victim, they made it appear like she was the aggressor, because that's what he was saying, which is, and she was saying as
Yep.
well, which is
She
what
was
is,
saying that as well.
which
Yep.
is very common
Mm.
for people who are victims, right,
Yep.
Jackie?
Yep.
Right,
To
when
to
you're a
claim.
victim,
Hmm.
it's your
Well, because
fault.
you
You're
get you
told your
get
whole time it's your fault, right?
right that, and in that moment when you're scared that your attacker is going to get caught, then now it's your role to step in and save them, um
Right. And your
out of
attacker has
fear, but
programmed you to
also
believe
out
that
of
it's your
you
fault.
yeah, you feel it's your duty. um I don't know. uh
You know, that's
Absolutely.
funny that you say that, because even just recently watching another documentary on Netflix called You Can't Say That. There was an episode on season 4, the first episode, about domestic and family abuse. I noticed one thing about every single person that has legitimately been abused. All of them blame themselves more than they blame their attackers and their abusers.
Hmm.
And I found that to be so interesting, how our brain will
Hmm.
justify behaviors that are wrong towards yourself, but will, forgive a person who is the aggressor or the perpetrator against your body or your mind.
Hmm.
And that, if you learn anything about psychology, that's totally normal. That's a
Hmm.
realistic
Yeah.
response, which is,
Yeah.
I think, part of the reason why they came up with, was it 11 or 12 step
12
questionnaire?
question. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, like I think they said 11, but it ended up being truly 12 questions
Right.
that
Right.
police now have to ask anyone in a domestic violence dispute, at least
Mhm.
in that state. I don't know if
Right.
that's world or nationwide. Do you know
Right.
that?
I'm not sure if that's nationwide either, but I do know in that area they implemented that law or that, bill to it.
Right.
Um, for sure. Mm.
Absolutely. But like thinking about that they have to ask these questions. And I remember reading over the questions. Some of them seemed kind of bizarre to me, but
Hmm.
behind every question, there's somebody who thoroughly thought why this is important. Like something I think I remember questioning, like, why would it matter if someone's unemployed? And I said
Hmm.
that to you, and you were like, well, because people who are generally unemployed are more likely to get into physical altercations or to be more violent because they're out of control and they don't have someone above them that they have to check in with and have to be held responsible to, you know.
Hmm.
And I never thought of that. I'm just thinking, like, what a stupid thing. Like, Gabby in that situation quit her job and was like vlogging across country. And lots of people, like
Hmm.
maybe billions of people, could have been like, she was jobless, you know?
Hmm.
Like, she had no job, but because she created a job for herself and decided, I'm going to do this now. I was this, but now I'm that, and she's the only one that determined this thing, right?
Right.
So there's like this gray area. Is she without a job, or does she have a job that she's created but she doesn't have a revenue yet? Like, what constitutes a job? Is a job something that makes an income, or is a job something that you do in hopes of an income?
Hmm.
Kind of like the starving artist
I,
epidemic.
I think it depends on how you treat it. So, say when I took that time off and I wasn't working in the casino anymore, and I was told, Jackie, focus on your writing. So that's what I did, and I treated my writing like a job. Whenever everyone would get up in the morning, I got up too. I was fixing breakfast or making coffee while, kiddos are off to school, the husband goes off to work. And what did I do? I had my coffee made when I made, his. And then I would, at this time it was, I think it was kind of the beginning of summer into spring time of year. And I would go out onto the back patio with my tablet and my coffee. And this was back when I was a smoker. So, and my cigarettes, and I just write. And if I kind of got to like a block space, like I'd just walk away, maybe take a dip in the pool if it was the summertime, or maybe in the workout room, I had one of those yoga swings. So I'd like do a couple poses on the yoga swing, just kind of move around, get my body active to try and like reactivate like my creative juices, I guess. I don't know. But I treated it like a job, and I allowed myself space to be fluid in it so I didn't feel like stifled. But in that time, I mean, I finished the first novel. I think it was like in almost 3 months, something like that, by every day treating it like a job. So to me, it was a job. Was I making money from it? Not very much. Because I wrote every day, I would get a reward for that. I think it gave me, $250 after a month of doing that. From every day you write at least X amount of words,
From the
that type
program
of
that
thing.
you were submitting it to?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a online platform, so they came out like episodes. So as
Oh,
long as I
nice.
released, or I submitted 1,000 words a day at least,
Mm.
at the end of a month, I got a $250 bonus. And then I got to enter it into contests and that kind of thing. Anyway, but to me, I feel like that was my job because I treated it like a job.
Right.
I could have treated it like a pastime. And then, yeah, then it wouldn't have been a job because I definitely really wasn't making money from it. I mean, you know, if I wasn't doing it every day, I wouldn't have got that money though.
Mm-hmm.
So there would have been no money and there would have been no consistency. So, yeah, no, I don't think it would have been a job then.
Right.
if I wasn't treating it daily like a job, whether it made money or not. I feel
Right.
like it's your
Right.
yes, people could look at her as jobless, but I don't think she treated it like she was jobless. So I don't think she can, he can say yes to that. I don't think he can say, no, she didn't have a job, so she's more likely to be an aggressor. Like, I don't think that is true. No.
Right. Well, with the whole Gabby Petito situation, I noticed that, and not I only, but also during the
Mm,
documentary, it was brought to everyone's attention at the end that other people have lost their children. Like Gabby was a young adult,
mhm. Yeah.
not saying she wasn't someone's child, but she wasn't a teen or a child that is missing or abducted. And even in her situation as a young adult who had parents missing her, she was able to within 3 weeks be found. And so kind of the whole discussion came up towards the end of the documentary where there are other people who have children who are children of color, whether they be black or brown, and it might have been months, years since they've had anybody give any coverage, if any at all.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting at the end where even Gabby's parents came to the realization and understanding, like, yeah, their daughter was privileged as a white woman in
Hmm.
America,
Yeah.
that she got a little extra coverage than a Latina or a Native American or an African American would have
Hmm.
had. And I
Or
thought that that was
actually,
really amazing.
did have. So actually, I got some numbers for that,
Yeah,
with what you're talking on. So
absolutely.
in 2023, right, 563,389 people were reported missing. So that's just
Over half a
missing
million.
in 2003, right?
Okay.
Uh 57% were white. Mind you, every statistic thing that I looked at, they have this little asterisk with this includes Hispanic. So it's not just white, it's white and Hispanic make up the 57%, right?
I wonder if that means they were like light-skinned Hispanic, like looked white, or they
Well,
lumped all of Hispanic into the Hispanic and white.
all of Hispanic into white. Because if you notice on
Oh.
any questionnaires, it's what is your race, right?
Are you Latina or not?
No, that's in ethnicity.
Mm,
Race is one area, and there is no Hispanic.
that's
It's
weird.
it's like white, Native American, African American, Alaskan, right?
Oh, that's
And
weird.
then in a different question, it's normally the one right next to it. It's what is your ethnicity? And it says Latino/Hispanic, yes or no? It is a
Hmm.
separate, it's ethnicity, not
Interesting.
race, right? Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
so that 57% white, including Hispanic, and then 40% is minority. It's black, some Native American, um, and then there's like a very small percentage of like Asian American, Asian. So mind you, in that 40% number, only 13% of our population is minority. Yet they make 40% of the missing people, and only 1/5 get media coverage. 1/5.
Huh.
And that is from the numbers of the overall year in 2023. And to bring it back to like what you had said with Gabby Petito having, so much news coverage, and even like her parents noticed it. So CNN, whenever Gabby Petito went missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
CNN mentioned Gabby Petito's case 346 times in 1 week. 1 week.
What?
1 week. Three, just one news network. And between the years, okay, between the years of 2011 and 2020, 400 indigenous women and girls went missing in Wyoming. So the same state that Gabby Petito went missing in,
What?
over a span of 9 years, 400
That's
brown
crazy.
women and girls
And
went
wait, wait,
missing,
wait.
but didn't
So,
receive. Where's their name?
well, that was what I was
346
gonna ask.
times.
Like, are you saying that they got one or two, or they got no media coverage? Like, were they getting media coverage once or twice, or you're telling me all of those
Well,
other indigenous women in the same state got no
right.
coverage? Is that what you're saying?
None of them, like zero of them, got the coverage that she got. Not saying that they didn't get any coverage, or one or two didn't get any, or maybe half of them got any, but none of them, none of these 400 in 9 years saw the kind of media coverage that Gabby Petito did, even
Huh.
in one single week.
I'm That's crazy. I'm really curious to know how much the numbers were with the other ones versus how much Gabby got in that 1 week.
It
Like
would
if
it
you
would
took
be it
all
would
of
be
that.
dependent on the case, but none of them saw the
Right.
numbers that she did. Yeah.
Of course. And so we have to naturally assume that it's because white lives seem to matter more in our country than the lives of indigenous people
Mhm.
or brown people.
I mean, that is. I mean, how can you not feel that way when that's what's happening?
Right.
A lot of people say that it's, oh well, it's because people in the newsroom, right? Majority of them are white men. You know,
I
there's
mean,
some women, but there's not a lot of people of color. So whenever someone goes missing, they're gonna feel more of their heartstrings when it's someone that looks like them, because
you
then
know,
they feel like they remind me of a family member or whatever.
you're so right, Jackie. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. Yeah.
I have definitely experienced that. I
Mm.
have known, and this is not, again, I just want to preface this where it's not always about race.
Right,
But
right, absolutely. Hmm.
in my experience in life, being a biracial woman who is half black and half white, and having had an array of friends who are all colors of the spectrum of life and humanity, and hearing their stories and experiences, it's very interesting to me when I hear things like I had a coworker, all of us, by the way, in a previous job I had a long time ago. And again, to protect the innocent, I'm going to make up names because I'm not here to
Absolutely.
crap
Hmm.
on anyone.
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
fine with telling you my own experience and
Hmm.
owning that, but I'm not going to give other people's names. So I worked with
Yeah,
another
we're
girl.
not airing nobody else's dirty laundry.
Exactly. I worked with
Yeah.
another girl at a job one time in my past. And again, to avoid any legal issues, I'm not going to say the name of my job,
Yep. Yep.
but it was a restaurant that served a lot of alcohol. I'm just going to say it like that.
Hmm.
And the way that the atmosphere of the restaurant was it was very open to alcoholism and to promoting it within the staff. So it was not irregular for the staff to drink in the beginning, middle,
Hmm.
or end of the shift.
Right.
Anytime throughout the
Yeah.
shift for
During.
free.
Yeah. On the
For
clock. Yeah.
free,
Yeah. Yeah.
we
For
on
free.
the clock could have alcohol shots, and it was
Right.
an added bonus, so to speak. And so I remember there was a girl that worked there, and she, in my opinion, was definitely a functional alcoholic. Her and her husband worked at the place, and both of them were drunk 70% plus of the shift all the time. And I
Yeah.
observed this. And because the majority of this clientele at this restaurant were regulars, the regulars were used to this. This was
Hmm.
normal experiences. And I remember one day, I'll tell you the city and state we lived in at least, right? We lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time. And Tulsa, Oklahoma has been known for being very divisive as far as race goes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know that the streets, I remember as a child, you can physically see where black people live versus
Yeah.
white people lived, because it was like as soon as black people lived in a certain area, the
Yeah.
streets were not taken care of at
Yeah.
all versus the white areas. And there was a
Hmm.
divided line that it was very physically observational.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it was the same with the situation. So I remember one day she came to work and she's talking to me. This girl, I'm going to call her Sarah. So Sarah came to work and she was like, "Oh my God, last night was crazy. I stayed like 3 hours after the shift. I drank all these shots of this and drank all that. And I was so fucked up. And I drove home and there was like this police stop for like alcohol, like specifically, like
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
like, what is it called? A police.
Um, a
Anyways,
traffic stop.
yeah, it was a traffic stop. It was one of the traffic stops. So
A
she said that she
what
was
do they
like,
call those?
she
They're called
said,
something.
yes,
Sorry.
exactly. But she was like a mile or less from her home.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she told me that she was very clearly intoxicated, and that when she pulled up to the police stop to see what she, or if she was intoxicated or not, they noticed she was, and she was like, "Listen, I just got off work, I'm almost home, blah blah blah." And they looked at her as two other white men, viewing her as this could have been my niece, my daughter, my granddaughter, anyone who
Hmm.
looks like them and they can
Right.
relate to. And they showed mercy on her and offered to drive her home instead of take her to jail when she was clearly far beyond the limit. Like, not even questionable. You could smell it on her breath. She was
Yeah.
not driving well. It was a police stop that they had already planned.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And all I think of is the fact that I can be driving perfectly and have had a glass of wine and can be harassed over if I'm sober or not, but they see this other girl who is blonde haired, blue eyed, obviously intoxicated, but when they see her, they immediately identify with her.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm talking about, racial bias. You see someone that looks like your niece, your daughter, your cousin, your wife,
Hmm.
your sister, your whomever in your family, and you can justify not giving them a ticket or ruining their life. But you can look at anyone else who doesn't look like you, and that same empathy and sympathy is not there,
Right.
and that you're okay with ruining their life where they, the other brown or black person who doesn't look like you, doesn't have the finances to be able to fight the system, whereas most
Hmm.
likely your sister, cousin, daughter, niece, or whomever
Right.
has money in the family to fight for that person, even if they're innocent or wrong. It doesn't matter. They
Right.
could be guilty or innocent, and they have money backing them to prove that they're innocent, whether they're not, which is like really messed up. But
Yeah.
at the same time, that is our system. And that is, to be frank, why Donald Trump is president right now of our country, because we have a country that if you are a male who is white, who owns land, you can basically get away with anything. And it's frustrating because I see the bias in media. And to your point earlier, that we have a white woman within 3 weeks of her being reported that she was attacked by someone. Days later, she was murdered, and weeks later, she was found. Her remains was found.
Mhm.
And then you're telling me about over a 9-year period in the same state, over 400 cases of indigenous women came up missing. And it seemed like, with the evidence that we have, there's not a lot of energy put behind finding
Right.
the perpetrator,
Mhm.
finding the bodies, caring about
Mhm.
brown and black lives in the same way we care about white lives, when the reality is the true Americans in America are brown and black.
Mhm.
The originals, the aborigines
The
are
OGs.
are
Sun
black
people.
and brown. Like,
Well,
there are
well,
even things that trace back to Africans that came here before Christopher Columbus and before white people, and they already like lived with Mexican Americans
mhm,
and with
mhm,
Native Americans that we again are giving these names to, which they
mhm,
have their
mhm.
own cultures that they have
Right.
named. But like,
Right. And I know there's some information on how not everybody that's black came from Africa, because a lot of them were here. They were already here. And
yeah,
it was kind of part of the slave trade and that mentality, like just make them all think they're slaves and then we can control them all, type of thing. Which I think that'd be a really interesting episode, by the way. Yeah,
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 absolutely.
there's a lot to that.
That there's
um
more history to America than white people created,
mhm,
basically.
mhm,
Like, we already
absolutely.
had history before.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and one of the things, like you had said too, when people feel that empathy because they can relate, that makes it even more apparent that we need diversity in the workplaces, that we need diversity in those newsrooms, in running, whoever is deciding to put what story out there. It just really shines a light on that importance, I feel like.
I'm glad that you even said that, because to your point of who shines the light on what story that goes out there,
Hmm. Hmm.
like, we right now have Jeff Bezos over a major newspaper in America right now. And he
Yeah.
just, within the last week or two, made a statement that he's only going to allow left wing propaganda,
Mm.
essentially what his party believes, to be published in that.
Right.
And that's
Right.
wild.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
living in a time that we supposedly allow freedom of speech, we
Yeah.
forget that in private publications that you don't have that freedom.
No.
Your freedom of speech in media and all of these places are literally dependent upon what your owner of the company
Yeah.
will allow.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's so much more important for podcasts
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
other independent sources to really say what they feel and to speak out
Yeah.
right now, because we need to have a voice right now for the voiceless, because we can't just allow like wealthy big media to be able to create the narrative
Hmm.
and then shut up and silence all of the other people who are really trying to tell an unbiased story about what's happening right now.
It shows the importance of how much we as information consumers, right,
Yeah.
to expand our knowledge base, where are we getting our information from? Because when we're aware that the things that we're hearing are coming from specific sources that have a specific agenda other
Yes.
than just trying to inform us,
Right.
we need to make sure that we're getting right sources for sure.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
that's why I love listening to different podcasts
Mhm.
myself,
Yeah.
like the Young Turks and Impact Theory and different podcasts that relay as close to a centrist mentality, because I'm not here to play teams and go, I'm
Mm,
Democratic or I'm Republican or I'm
right,
black
right.
or I'm white or I'm right versus wrong.
Mm,
I'm
oh,
here for humanity, and the
oh,
reality is humanity and what we're going through is more complicated than black and white, because there's a
ab-
lot of gray
absolutely.
areas, a lot of
Absolutely.
gray areas.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
as a person who's biracial, speaking to another friend who is also biracial, like the different races that we're mixed with, we don't get to sit here and go, oh, I only agree with this side and that's what
Hmm.
I'll ever only agree with.
Right.
That's BS. That is not how we feel,
Mm-mm.
because we are able to view life through a different scope and go, hey, I can be brown and white and see how my white side has mistreated me, but also see how
Mhm.
my brown side has mistreated me, and
Yep.
can see the issues on both sides, and then can come to understand what I think I needed truly to
Yeah.
have this balanced life, and then talk to both sides about it and say, Mom, this is what I noticed that was racist
Mhm.
and I didn't appreciate it. Dad, this is what I noticed that was part of your culture that
Mhm.
left me fatherless and I
Mhm.
don't appreciate. And you can
Right.
have those conversations without crapping on the entire culture, but saying, hey, this is what I noticed and this is how I was affected.
Yeah. There was actually, from my Latino side, not feeling approving of, me being the product of, my mom's white,
Being biracial,
so
yes. You're not fully Latina.
I'm, I, I'm the product of diluting, my father's bloodline, so
Muddying the bloodline, which
yeah.
Trump actually just
Mhm.
spoke about recently. And my
Yeah.
family feels the same way. I remember when my brother was inside my mom's womb and she told her family, her mom and siblings, about her pregnancy, and
Mm,
they were like, no, abort, 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 like
mm,
do not have this baby. So I can agree with that type of limited thinking that were
mhm.
in our families, that
Yeah.
they saw something that was different from themselves, and their first and
Yeah.
initial thought is, no, don't
Yeah.
do that. It's
Mhm.
bad because we don't know the outcome. So let's just
Right.
control as much as we can control and
Mhm.
end that,
Yeah.
you know?
I will say I feel like where a lot of theirs, it wasn't necessarily just because like color of skin, right? They weren't just like, oh, because she's white. It's like their culture is
Yeah,
so like
absolutely.
rich of like tradition and from what they've come from and what they're building towards, and you're really gonna go and like
Yep,
no, it
all
should
that
be
up.
with like, yeah, like keep it within the family basically,
Which is very ancestral, if you
well,
think about
you
that.
know what I mean, the Latino La Familia, like the
No, and I'm not even talking about
culture.
Latina.
Yeah.
That's every culture, Jackie.
Yeah.
Every culture has that keep it in the family mentality, for real. But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
think about it,
Well,
like let's go back to really
the
quick, sorry for
royal
interrupting.
family, they
I
were
was
all
just gonna say, oh my God, this is why we're best friends, Jackie. I was
it's
just gonna say that fact. The royal
mm,
family is an incestual family. All
mhm,
they do
mhm,
is have sex within their family to
mhm.
continue the royal blood,
Yep.
which to anyone outside that family would find disgusting.
Yep.
But
Yep.
in their way, they keep
Mhm.
it holy. And
Yeah.
holy is set apart
Mm,
and untouched. That's
yep.
what the word holy means.
Yep.
So that is a monarchy mentality.
It is. It is absolutely. but there's a distinctive, you can see that discrimination, right? The feeling of that wall that people have to build because they feel different, right?
Right.
So different. And I
Mhm.
know something you had said earlier, when you were talking about Tulsa and an experience out in Tulsa. I know when I was really little, I don't remember what daycare it was. It was before I was in school, so I mean I was, you
It's
know
preschool daycare.
yeah.
Yeah.
My mom picked me up and I was crying, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "They called me a bad name at school." And she's like, "What would they call you?" I'm like, "I can't say it. It's a bad word." And she was like, "You're not going to get in trouble. Just, tell me what it was." And I was like, "Mexican." And she was like, "Well, honey, that's not a bad word." And she was like, "And you're not Mexican, you're Paraguayan." So, she helped me understand that there is a difference, but it's not bad. But if you think about that, so that means, like, I mean, I was obviously, it was before kindergarten, so I was like under the age of 4, like 4 or younger, right? I was in school and I was being made fun of, and the name that they called me, like it's a bad word, is Mexican. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's one of those where it's like, yeah, like there were kids literally making fun of me for that. And I mean, granted, not that I think there's anything, there's nothing wrong with being Mexican. It's just I'm not Mexican.
But the
But
reality is it was white
mm,
children that were trying to differentiate you from who they were,
mm.
is what
Or
it was.
right, I mean, whoever, but as children, they were directing dislike for me and decided to call me names, and that's what they called me. And it's just kind of yeah, it goes to show, like, kids don't do that on their own. They
Right.
learn that,
I
you
mean,
know.
I experienced many things like that, being half white and half black
Hmm.
in
Oh,
Oklahoma as a child. I remember when I was
your
4 or 5 years
Minnesota
old.
story floors me.
Yeah, I mean that's as an adult in 2023 or
Yeah.
2022. I'm talking about like as a child in the
Hmm.
early
Hmm.
90s in Oklahoma,
Right.
having friends that when I was 4 and 5, their mothers are in the car talking to their boyfriend or their significant other while I'm in the
Hmm.
back seat with their child, talking about how disgusting it is for people to blend races and how that's why we look like leopards and we have all this messed up skin. And I remember my skin being splotchy,
Wow.
and knowing at 4 and 5 that she was talking about me. Like I remember that, and how she just
Wow.
said how it's disgusting and a disgrace. And then me being in like middle school, being around 10 and 11 years old, and having my white friends introduced me to their friends as
Hmm.
their black friend Debbie. And I'm
Oh
like,
no.
wait, what? That's wild because
You're
I
like, that's
never
that's my identity. You're like, "Well, I'm not your big boot friend, Debbie." Like, what?
I'm not just your friend, Debbie.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Like I have to be a race or a color or some sort of
Mm,
physical distinction before I'm your friend with a name.
right, right.
I remember thinking at that point in my life, I never would have ever thought to label any of my friends in that way. I would
Hmm.
have never
Hmm.
thought to be like, my white and Latina friend Jackie. Like, that would have been the look on my face saying that. Like, because
Hmm.
it's so wrong in my mind.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
for someone to regard me that way
Hmm.
was really offensive. I remember feeling hurt as a child.
Wow.
And I was like
Wow.
maybe sixth, seventh, maybe eighth grade. I was middle school when it
Wow.
happened.
So
And
I
I
mean,
just,
this is after we've been friends for years
yeah,
when this
this is,
happened.
this was a girl
Wow.
who was in like the upper middle class and wealth wise. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember she had kind of confessed to me that they kind of have money, but they're not doing too good because I remember going to their house and their house was not furnished. Like they had a living room with like a sofa, but almost nothing else. And they had like some
Right.
stuff in bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of led me to believe this was like sixth, maybe seventh grade. She
Mm-hmm.
had kind of led me to believe like her dad was a lawyer who was doing okay, but not that great, but he had to like keep up some sort of like
Facade.
facade that they
Mm-hmm.
were doing good when they
Yeah.
clearly weren't. And I just remember thinking of how these people are in a position where they're not doing great, but they still feel good enough to
Mm-hmm.
feel that they're better than me. Even though my family wasn't financially anywhere near where they were,
Right.
my family was like living their truest life. Like we knew we didn't have a lot of money and we weren't ashamed of that. But it was kind of
Yeah.
weird for me to be around a family that was ashamed of the fact that they weren't doing as good as they should have been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it made sense in the end now as an adult that she and her family would have to bring up my color and my culture to
Mm.
make me feel less than them so
Lower
they can
than
feel better than
that,
me,
higher
you
than, yeah,
know?
above something or
Yeah.
someone. Wow.
And
You know,
I'm just thinking, like, you live in this beautiful house that's almost empty, and I live in this, like, crappy apartment that's, like, filled with love.
full of love. Yeah.
So,
It's almost
like,
like the perfect representation though, right?
right,
They've got this
right,
hollow shell.
right.
That's all they
That's
have.
true.
There's
Like, on the
no
outside, beautiful, but on
enrichment
the inside,
inside.
hollow and empty and
Empty.
unloved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good,
Mm,
good example. That
yeah.
really is.
Wow. That's wild. I know there were certain people in our early friendship that had a backward way of thinking and a
Yeah.
really bad way of expressing it. And I remember having like a really hard time with it, because there I am in this like weird spot where it's like, you're my best friend, and, love you, mom. But yeah, she's from a different time, from a really small town, and certain things that, she thought was cute and endearing was not. And, I remember how it made me feel. Like I was always just so like, like uncomfortable with it.
Are
Um,
we gonna say it or are we gonna, like, tap dance around it?
with what she called you.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to say it? Like I don't feel comfortable saying them. I don't like, and I remember every time she'd say something, I'd be like, "Mom, no."
I also
Um,
remember that.
um,
So for our audience,
mm,
to give background again, to reiterate what Jackie said, we're not saying this to bring anyone down or to
Absolutely
say
not.
what
Yeah.
a POS a person is or even their mentality was at the time. It just
Hmm.
was the time
Yeah.
and the way that people felt. And her mother and my mother came up or they were born in the mid to late 40s. So they grew up in the midst of racism, thick, like mashed potatoes thick, right? And
Yeah.
so her mother did not approve of me because of her background, but she didn't want to like kill Jackie's love for me. So when I was around, I feel like she purposely called me a specific name that made me feel in my fifth, my, I should say 11 and 12 and 13-year-old mind, because it took me
Yep.
many years to understand what she was really saying, even
Yep.
though my brain kind of understood, but it just took it took a while
Hmm.
for my brain to process.
Well,
But
and how do you process that? Like, it's at the time it's your best friend and it's their parent. You know, I mean, what do you do with that?
so again, in backstory, the way that Jackie's mom wanted to raise her and the way that my parents raised me were two very different ways. So her mom kind of had an anger or an animosity towards the way that my parents, my black dad and white mom, raised me. And when she would have me come stay the night, I was often referred to as her niglet, but it was like in an endearing way, like, "Oh, how's my niglet doing? How are you doing, my little niglet?" And I'm not gonna lie, because I was a child and a child of like the Pooh Bear phase, I kind of thought she was saying like piglet. Like I was like her little baby, and I didn't think of like what the
Hmm.
meaning really meant.
Right. Right.
So, in my fifth and sixth and seventh grade mind at the time when I was hanging out with Jackie and was really, really, really close and staying the night, I don't think I looked at it like she was saying a racial slur towards me.
Hmm.
I kind of viewed it in my child mind like it was her way of trying to like love and embrace me, even though I was not what
As
she wanted.
as she's pointing out a difference that didn't make any difference. You know what I mean? That, to be honest, in a lot of ways, like, hell, I feel like it's one of the reasons, like, I just love you, you know, and it's a part of you, you know. So it's just one of those where I don't know. I remember it always made me feel uncomfortable, and I knew mom was trying to be cute, you know, because she's like, oh, she knows what I mean. It's a term of endearment, and you know, I just remember telling her, like, no, like, no, no, it's not.
With the racial bias, I think, in our society, I think, especially with the current place that we're at politically, with Donald Trump being our current president and him undoing the diversity, equity, and inclusion acts that
Hmm.
started
Hmm.
back in 1965. Like, this has been around for a very long time. It's kind
Right.
of goes along with affirmative action, but it's not exactly the same thing,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
because diversity, equity, and inclusion, first and foremost, protects white women before anything. And
Hmm.
then after that, it's like the other Latin American people, like your people. And then the very last person that gets a benefit is Black people.
Hmm.
And even in that, there's disability. Like when Donald Trump recently, do you remember within like the first week of him taking presidency, how that Black Hawk helicopter collided with a plane, like a commercial
Hmm.
airline, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
He literally immediately blamed it on DEI, which I found to be extremely unethical and crazy to
Yeah.
say that a
It's got to be
plane
them.
a plane and a commercial airline collided because there's some sort of law that allowed people who were handicapped or women or brown or black or anyone or gay or anyone essentially that was not a straight white man who is able-bodied, like
Mhm.
excuse me, like that is crazy to me for a leader of our country to make a statement so blatant against
Anybody
diversity,
else that's
equity.
not him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
literally.
looked like him. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's and to say that it has to be one of them. Like, there's no way that could be at the fault of. someone who looks
It,
like me. Like, what?
right. It's
What?
someone else. Like
Wow.
to push the narrative that
Mm,
making America great again is really making America white male driven and run, essentially, like with white males who are supposedly heterosexual and who are supposedly getting with the same agenda that Donald Trump is getting with.
right.
And first of all, I want to say I don't want to hate anyone, and I don't want to believe that any leadership that our country is under is going to intentionally drive us in a direction opposite of where we should be going. But having seen Donald Trump, his first administration, and then his plans over the last 4 years, or even lack thereof before he
Mm,
became president again, and then him returning to this office, it's very disturbing to me to hear him say things like, I'm going to actually read
mhm.
specifically so
Yes. Yes. Please do.
I
Please
don't
do.
want to I don't want to misquote what our
Mhm.
current president is saying. So when he made his first statement about this plane crash with the helicopter, with the
Mhm.
Black Hawk, which is going to be
Right.
a military helicopter with a civilian aircraft,
Right.
um,
Mhm.
he says, we don't know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and we're going to state those opinions now. The FAA's diversity, big push to diversity into the FAA program, is the reason that this happened. And as soon as he said that, my first initial thought was like, wait, what does diversity and the FAA program have to do
With
with this
these.
crash?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Mhm.
And then the reporter was like, well, how have you come to this conclusion? And his response was, because I have common sense. And that to me was like,
If you don't think, if
obviously the
you don't
wrong,
agree with me, you have no common sense. If you don't
because
understand or see how I'm seeing it, then you're dumb. Like,
you're dumb. I'm smart. I have common sense. But then, like, before this reporter even said that, they went further into questioning Donald Trump and they said, like, what is it that, you know, makes DEI an issue? And he essentially was like, well, under Biden and under Biden and under Obama, they allowed for people to be hired that have physical disabilities like dwarfism and people who have mental disorders. But like even when he said mental disorders, he wasn't specific about all the said mental disorders. And in my opinion, he has a mental disorder. Like Donald Trump is a what is the term? He's a narcissist, and narcissism is a mental disorder.
mhm.
So you have a mental disorder, Mr. President, but you don't want to focus on your mental disorders. You want to focus on mental disorders that somehow disqualify someone from the FAA and from being able to be on the traffic control board. But the reality is I know you and I've already talked about this, to be on the traffic
Mhm.
control in the FAA, they have extremely strict qualifications already, and Donald Trump acted like he's coming up with some new harder restrictions, which is not the case, because
Right.
you have to be between 21 and 30 years old because they want you to have a 20 to 30 year career in it. They've made comments like you have to be so intelligent, like you have to pass certain scores and markers to be able to do that. And then Donald came in and he was like, oh, they made it like, oh, anyone dumb with
Mm.
DEI can do it, but we're going to make people who are geniuses have to do that. But that's funny you say that, but in the time that you're going to make people, you stop the hiring of or even fire people who are already in this
Mm.
position where you already know that it's very, very, very difficult to even be able to be in that position
Mm.
to do that. They're saying that it's almost like essentially a 3D Tetris in the sky with real people's lives at risk in order to understand what it's like to be a traffic controller. And I remember once you had even told me that when you were wanting to go to the military that you had that as one of your jobs. Like, do you think that going into the military that was like something easy for you to be able to like acquire as an occupation?
Well, I know with just getting accepted into the Air Force, there's a lot of pre-qualifications that I had to meet just to get into the Air Force.
Right,
And then when you go to the MEPS, which is, where they do all this testing and if you can physically do certain jobs.
right,
Air traffic control was one of my top 10 that I wanted to do. um, I remember back then, really deeply looking into every job that was an option for me. And even though I didn't know what was the most I could carry, because to
right.
be a firefighter, you have to carry X amount of weight so far of a distance, in case you got
Yeah,
to
I remember your
rescue a
sister
body,
doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it makes sense. With this, they have a lot of prerequisites just for the military alone. And then
yeah,
let's say, because we're talking about air traffic control, and then for air traffic control, then there's conditions for that. And then if
yeah.
I mean, it gets higher with different jobs, security
Right.
clearance, all sorts of things. So just in the job itself, because they rely so much on, you have to be so zoned in, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have like perfect vision, no contacts, no glasses, which is understandable because I mean, right now mine are all foggy. What if that happens while you're trying to watch this, and you make a mistake because your contact ripped or whatever?
Right,
Um, they take frequent breaks because they got to be able to step away and be clear minded when they're, constantly, looking at this. And the stress, just all these factors, right? And they make sure you're mentally, capable to do these things on your intellectual level, but also mental health. They test you. Like
yeah,
they have all these
absolutely.
things. Like you have interviews, you have testing where they, sit there and question. It is not an easy position to get into. I can't tell you if I passed all the things that would have qualified me for it or disqualified me. I don't know. That's not the job that I ended up getting when I, went in. I did get one of my 10, but that was not the one I got. But yeah, so I don't even actually know what my scores were on that. But still, yeah, it's very extensive. And I'm sure for the, FFA, it's no different. If you're trying to be air traffic control for the military, you would think it's they've got to have, similar, if not higher or
Right,
adequate
absolutely.
standards. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Well, I
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing that because that just lets you know that this is not an easy job at all to qualify for. Like you did
Mhm.
that through the military. Imagine a civilian just applying for that job.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's incredible. So I just want everybody to understand, like, before you listen to anything, even ourselves,
Right.
go look this
Absolutely.
up,
Mhm.
look up the background to these jobs and the qualifications, and don't just listen to what the president says, don't just listen to what Musk says, don't just listen to what we say or anyone else. Like, this is the one time in history that we are equipped to be able to like find out for
Mhm.
ourselves if someone is misleading us or not. So take that opportunity right now to ask Siri, Google, Alexa, anything
Yeah.
what you need to know about a specific thing, and just keep digging and digging and digging, and I promise you'll be able to find out. And that's what we're doing, and sometimes our digging is close to the surface, and as we go on it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper, and we
Mm-hmm.
hope you all are open to digging with us and getting to the bottom of this. This is just part 1. Our next episode is going to be part 2 of this, and we're going to keep going into it from domestic violence to what happens post domestic violence and what signs that you need to look for. So please check us out and keep looking for us. Thank you so much for listening and taking time, and leave any comments in our comment section. We look forward to responding to you. Y'all have a great night. Thank you again, and like and subscribe, okay? Bye.
Bye.